the effects of the inspiring teachers, this was the next open question. What did the inspiring teacher inspire you to do? And how had their feelings changed? This is a summary of the comments. I won't comment further on them at this stage. What they did as a result, they all commented on ways they had put more effort into learning, almost all. And they, again, it's not the focus of today's seminar, but they listed many, many different strategies or activities that they used to learn English. Many of them, most of them, outside the class. So I think the research does offer evidence of this sort of basic linear pattern that inspiring teaching happens. It does happen, even if it is quite rare. Inspiring teacher leads to learner motivation. So it's developing motivation inside the learner's own desire to learn English. And that leads to effortful learning. So the good news is that teachers matter, and they can inspire their learners and can make a real difference in the end. As teachers, we know that, actually, don't we? But it's good to have, I think it's good to have sort of research evidence to show it. Okay, now moving on to the second part of our presentation. My colleague Martin Waddell went to China, I went to Indonesia, and we went to meet and teach a couple of 3 teachers in China, 4 teachers in Indonesia. And we're going to focus on 2 of teachers, one in China, one in Indonesia. These are pseudonyms, but just let you read about them. So Mei Ling had many nominations, well over 20 by learners. As far as we could tell there was learners at different ages, so she had inspired learners for more than one class. Similarly, Lestari had about 8 nominations. They're both different though. You know, Mei Ling only has 4 years experience, she was younger. Lestari had 14 years experience, she was in her 30s, she'd been abroad, note. She graduated from a very high status university, whereas I understand that Guangzhou University is not particularly high status. Anyway, there are people from China here. Yeah? Yeah, but from Guangzhou? No. No. So, different, but both apparently, according to the survey, inspiring teachers. And these are some of the comments that were made about them. And I've laid them out like this. This is just a sample of comments because they seem quite similar, the comments. Most of these comments are translations from Chinese or Indonesian. Here's a couple more. So yeah, this won't please you, Chris, at all, but they are fairly typical comments. This won't please you, Melissa. prefers to sound like an American, not a British. I should say, I think British English was favoured, actually. There were more comments about British English than American, actually, but this happened to be favouring American English. So, on the surface, what we seem to have here are, I mean, reading the comments, you might imagine that these are teachers who perhaps teach in a similar way, that they certainly both inspire their learners. Their learners seem to say similar things about them. If I dare say, I can't show it here, but I dare say that the learners who were inspired went on to do similar things as well. So the effects were similar. Let's have a look at how they actually teach. And I'm going to show you clips from our classroom observation videos. I'll show you about sort of four minutes from Mei Ling and a couple of minutes from Lestari. Very short clips, you don't need to see more, I don't think. I'm sorry the quality is not great and you may not be able to hear what the teacher's saying, but I think the main thing is that you'll sort of get an idea of what's happening. And then afterwards we can compare them.
As loudly as you can. Can you? Yes, you're ready. 3, 2, 1, go. Good job. Other mini group. 1. Big group 2. No friend. 庆祝 friend. Next one. Celebration group 11. Pretend. How to read pretend. Pretend. Group.
This is the other picture of the good proportion of food. As you can see, the vegetables have more portion than the whole grains. And as you can see, and you can see also that fruits also the most little proportion in this plate. This is the
Okay, sorry, I can't they're going to tell you about what their students have for lunch, but I'm sure our participant will tell you if need be. So can we just move on then to looking at what these teachers actually did. It was only one lesson that we observed, but it was a lesson that they had put on for us. So, of course, it's not necessarily typical of what they do every day, but it is a lesson that they thought that was inspiring or motivating, at least. And as you saw from those brief clips, Mei Ling and Lestari differed on almost every dimension of teaching that you could think of. So Mei Ling's lesson was a revision lesson. Revising textbook material. It had, in 45 minutes, there were about 9 different stages. So, in a very rapid pace throughout. It moved from stage to stage. You know, each stage, no stage lasted longer than about 6 minutes. Whereas Lestari's lesson, like most Indonesian classes, was about 90 minutes long. And it was all taken up with student presentations. There were interspersed with some questions. So at the end of a presentation, other groups offered questions. Mei Ling initiated everything in her class, and the learners were responding to her. Whereas, you know, the irony was, we went to Lestari's class looking for inspiring teaching, and there wasn't any teaching. She was sitting at the back. You couldn't see her there. There was a focus on language throughout in Mei Ling's lesson. It was, you know, all about getting the right answer, eliciting the right answer, practicing right, correct English. Whereas in Lestari's lesson, the focus was on the content of the group presentation. They were talking about a survey of Indonesian school kids' eating habits, There was an emphasis on competition in Mei Ling's class. Everything that all the activities they did, she had I don't know whether you saw it, but she had a kind of scoring pattern on the board, and if someone from one group got an answer right, she marked it on the board. And at the end of the lesson, there was a counting, and the group who had the most marks won. Whereas in Lestari's lesson, the emphasis was definitely on collaboration. The groups weren't competing against each other in any way. And of course, the learners had to collaborate to do the presentations. And finally, the materials and activities were completely based around the textbook in the Chinese lesson, whereas the materials were produced by the learners in Lestari's lesson. So the learners were seemingly saying similar things about the teachers, and yet the teachers, and they were both apparently very inspiring, and yet their behaviour, on the evidence of the lessons we saw, was profoundly different. Why? Well, we would suggest that there are macro contextual differences, influences at work here. And here, this is just a selection of things that we think might help explain the differences. So starting most obviously perhaps with the washback from tests. Chinese national education system, very test-oriented. Teachers and learners alike set their targets on achieving good results in tests, and this is clearly having a washback effect in the classroom. Not to say that tests don't matter in Indonesia, but that just the culture of the classroom doesn't seem quite so oriented towards, or schools don't seem quite so oriented, at least for now, towards national exams. A big difference is teacher autonomy. In China, it seems there is very little autonomy given to teachers, very little freedom to teachers given to teachers, whereas in Indonesia in the last 10 years, the education system is decentralized. Schools have more autonomy, and within schools, teachers have more autonomy, and confident teachers are likely to exploit that, like Lestari, and will do their own thing. They don't have to follow the textbook anymore. So undoubtedly, that sort of climate has affected what they do. The length of the lessons, Indonesia has 90-minute lessons. I don't think even Mei Ling could teach in that way, that very teacher-controlled way, for 90 minutes. But for 45 minutes, she could probably sustain it. She did sustain it. Possibly there's a national culture. I mean, this is kind of speculation, really, on our part, but possibly Indonesia. Lestari has been influenced. She's been abroad. She's been influenced by ideas that she picked up in America from her 6-month Fulbright. She's brought them back, ideas about learner autonomy, about encouraging learners to do projects outside the class and so on. Whereas Mei Ling hasn't been abroad. Possibly Indonesia is a little bit more open and more welcoming of external influences generally, and of pedagogical ideas more specifically, than China is at the moment.